My name is Claire Whitman. I was 28 when Ethan Miller looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I think we should just be friends." He said it so calmly that, for a second, I thought I had misunderstood him. We had been together a little over a year, but anyone around us would have guessed longer. Ethan's hoodie lived on the back of my chair. His spare toothbrush was in my bathroom. His favorite coffee was always in my kitchen cabinet, even though I never drank it. My apartment had slowly become half mine, half his. In that quiet way, relationships take over your life before you even notice. Our friends joked we were basically married without the paperwork, and honestly, I liked that. I liked knowing which side of the bed he slept on. I liked that he texted me before big meetings. I liked that he would show up after work, kick off his shoes, and say, "I swear, your place is the only place where my brain shuts up." For a long time, I believed that meant something permanent. Then little by little, Ethan started changing. At first, it was small. He stayed out later with coworkers. He said he needed space to breathe. He talked about independence, like it was something I had stolen from him. He started saying things like, "I don't want to lose myself in a relationship." And sometimes I feel like we got serious too fast. I listened because I loved him. When someone you love says they feel trapped, your first instinct is to loosen your grip, even if you never knew you were holding on too tightly. Then one night, sitting across from me in my living room, Ethan said the sentence that split everything in two. "I think we should just be friends." No yelling, no crying, no dramatic fight, just those words, placed carefully between us like he had rehearsed them in the mirror. I remember staring at him, waiting for the rest, waiting for him to say he was confused, or scared, or needed time, but he only looked tired. So I nodded. "If that's what you need," I said. His expression softened with relief, and somehow that hurt worse than anger would have. Before he left, he touched the doorframe and said, "I don't want us to stop talking. You're still one of my favorite people. We just don't work as a couple." At the time, it sounded mature, gentle, even, so I said, "Sure, we can still be friends." I didn't know those words would become the beginning of something far more complicated. At first, I did exactly what I thought friendship meant. I stopped texting, "Good morning." I stopped checking whether he got home safe after nights out. I stopped asking if he had eaten. I stopped being the person who remembered his deadlines, his moods, his mother's doctor appointments, and the exact way he liked his coffee when he was stressed. I changed the passwords to Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, all the invisible strings that still tied our daily lives together. It wasn't revenge. It was reality. We were not a couple anymore. I also stopped keeping his spare key in my drawer. I stopped letting him borrow my car when his was acting weird. I stopped answering every call like it was still my responsibility to fix whatever had gone wrong in his day. To me, that was friendship. Kindness with boundaries. But to Ethan, apparently, it felt like betrayal. At first, he pretended not to notice. He sent harmless messages. "Hope work isn't destroying you. Saw your favorite muffins today? Remember that diner we found on the way back from Vermont?" I replied politely. But I didn't lean in. No heart emojis. No inside jokes stretched into late-night conversations. No emotional doorway left cracked open. Then came the rainy night. It was almost 11 when my phone rang. Ethan's name lit up the screen. And for one painful second, My body reacted before my brain did. I sat up. My hand reached for my keys. The old Claire, the girlfriend Claire, was already preparing to rescue him. His car had broken down, he said. He was stranded near a gas station. I closed my eyes. Did you call roadside assistance? I asked gently. There was a pause. You're not coming. The disappointment in his voice was so sharp it almost sounded like accusation. I swallowed. Ethan, you said, we're just friends. You'll be okay. He let out a small laugh. Cold and disbelieving. Wow. Okay. Then he hung up. I sat there afterward with the phone still in my hand, listening to the rain hit the window. I didn't feel cruel. I didn't feel free either. I just felt awake. A few days later, he texted again. You don't have to act like I'm a stranger just because we're not together. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Because I wasn't treating him like a stranger. I was treating him like what he had asked to be. A friend. And that was when I began to understand the truth. When Ethan said, let's just be friends. What he really meant was, keep loving me like your boyfriend. But don't expect anything from me. He wanted the comfort without the commitment, the access without the responsibility, the safety net without the label, and when I stopped giving him all of that, he didn't know what to do with the silence. Slowly, he started appearing again in strange little ways. A comment on an old photo, a message at midnight. A casual? Did you change the Netflix password? I wanted to write, yes, Ethan, because you broke up with me. Instead, I replied, yeah, I did. Nothing more. And with every boundary I set, I felt something inside me returning. I started sleeping better. I went back to the gym. I cooked meals that weren't based on what Ethan liked. I watched shows he used to call boring. I stopped checking my phone every time it buzzed, for the first time in months. My life started sounding like mine again, but peace has a way of offending people who benefited from your confusion, and Ethan had been used to standing at the center of my world, so when I finally stepped back, he didn't see it as healing. He saw it as abandonment, and soon, he would make sure I knew exactly how much he hated losing control of me. For a few weeks after that, things were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you glance at your phone for no reason, expecting a message that never comes. I told myself it was a good thing. The breakup was behind me. Ethan had chosen his path, and I was finally learning how to walk mine. Then, little by little, and he started appearing again. Not in person. Online, a heart reaction on an old photo from months ago. A comment under a picture of my dog. A message about a restaurant we used to visit. Each interaction seemed harmless by itself. Friendly. Casual. But together, they felt like fishing lines dropped into the water. Small attempts to see if I would bite. One evening, I posted a picture from a hiking trail. A few minutes later, Ethan messaged, "Since when do you like hiking?" I smiled despite myself. "You always said hiking was boring." I typed back, "Maybe I changed." His response came immediately. "Guess people do that." The conversation ended there. But something about it lingered, because during our relationship, Ethan rarely noticed when I changed. Now that I was gone, suddenly, every difference stood out. A few days later, another message appeared. New haircut. Looks good. Again. Innocent. Again. Familiar. I recognized the tone. Back when we were together, Ethan often tested the waters before difficult conversations. A compliment here. A joke there. Little emotional probes. And now he was doing it again. Only this time, there was no relationship to protect. One night, Just after midnight. My phone buzzed beside my bed. "Are you awake?" I stared at the message. Then, against my better judgment, I replied, "Yeah." "What's up?" 3 dots appeared immediately. "Nothing. Just couldn't sleep. Miss, talking to you?" My chest tightened. Not because I wanted him back, because I remembered exactly how powerful those words used to be. A year earlier, they would have sent me rushing into a conversation that lasted until sunrise. Now they felt different, heavy, complicated. I looked at the screen for nearly a minute. Then I turned my phone off. The next morning, there was another message. "Guess you're too busy now." I didn't answer. That was when the invisible war truly began. Not a loud war, not one anyone else could see. A war of attention. A war of expectations. A war over who was allowed to move forward first. The strange thing was that Ethan never asked to get back together. Not once. Instead, every time I pulled away, he found a reason to reappear. A memory, a joke, a question, a late-night text. It was as though he wanted to remain emotionally connected without actually choosing me. Eventually, I stopped trying to understand it. Instead, I focused on myself. Work became easier. My apartment felt lighter. I started seeing friends I hadn't spent enough time with in months. Then one Friday evening, a coworker invited me to a birthday party. Normally, I would have declined. I was tired, but something told me to go. So I did. That decision changed everything. The party was small, just 20 or 30 people gathered in the back room of a local restaurant. The music wasn't too loud. The lighting was warm. People laughed without trying too hard. It felt comfortable. Halfway through the evening, I found myself standing near the dessert table, debating whether 1 slice of cheesecake would be enough. "Get 2. The voice beside me made me laugh. I turned. A woman with dark hair and kind eyes was smiling at me. "Life's too short for 1 slice." I laughed. That's dangerous advice. Good advice is usually dangerous. That was how I met Daniel Lane. We spent most of the evening talking movies, books, travel, terrible first dates. The weird things people reveal after 2 glasses of wine. Nothing dramatic, nothing forced, just easy conversation. The kind that flows naturally, when neither person is trying to impress the other. When the party ended, I left with a smile I hadn't felt in a long time. 3 days later, Sophie texted. Then we texted again. And again. At first, it wasn't romantic. Not really. Just 2 people enjoying each other's company. Then, one evening, during a conversation about family, she casually mentioned a name that made me freeze. Ethan. I stared at my phone. My stomach dropped. After a moment, I typed carefully, "Wait, Ethan Miller." Her response came almost instantly. "Yeah." "Why?" I sat on my couch, suddenly unable to breathe, because Ethan was my ex-boyfriend. For several seconds, neither of us replied. Then Sophie's message appeared. "Oh, well, that's awkward." I laughed, despite the shock. A minute later, another message arrived. "Don't worry, I'm not telling him." Something about that made me smile. Not because it solved anything, because it felt honest. Weeks passed. We kept talking. Then came coffee. Coffee became lunch. Lunch became dinner. Dinner became long walks through quiet neighborhoods, where conversations drifted effortlessly from serious topics to ridiculous ones. For the first time since my breakup, I wasn't analyzing every feeling. I wasn't wondering whether I was moving too fast. I wasn't comparing anyone to Ethan. I was simply enjoying someone's company, and it felt wonderful. What made Sophie different wasn't excitement. It was peace. There were no emotional puzzles to solve, no hidden tests, no mixed signals. If she liked something, she said so. If something bothered her, she talked about it. The simplicity felt almost unfamiliar. Then one afternoon, everything exploded. I was sitting at my desk when my phone began vibrating nonstop. Text after text. Call after call. Ethan. At first, I assumed something terrible had happened. An emergency. A family problem. Un accident. Then I opened the messages. You're unbelievable. Seriously, my cousin. I stared at the screen. Another message arrived. Was this your plan all along? Then another. How could you do this? My pulse quickened. A moment later, the phone rang again. This time I answered, Ethan. His breathing sounded uneven. Are you dating Daniel? The question came out sharp enough to cut glass. I leaned back in my chair. We've gone out a few times. Silence. Then, how could you? I blinked. What? Out of everyone. Claire. You picked my cousin. His voice cracked between anger and hurt. The reaction was so intense, it almost confused me. You broke up with me. That's not the point. Then, what is the point? Another pause. Longer this time. Finally, he said quietly. You knew this would hurt me. The accusation hit harder than the shouting. Because it wasn't true. I hadn't pursued Sophie to get revenge. I hadn't even known they were related when we met. Ethan. I said carefully. This isn't about you. The silence that followed felt dangerous. Then he laughed. A short, bitter sound. Right. The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone. Something inside me shifted. Not because Ethan was angry, because for the first time, I could see the truth clearly. This had never been about friendship. It had never been about healing. It had never been about wanting the best for each other. Ethan didn't want freedom. He wanted authority. He wanted the ability to leave while still deciding how close I stayed. He wanted the right to move on while quietly expecting me not to. And now that I was doing exactly what he claimed he wanted living my life, he couldn't stand it. That night, I barely slept. Not because I felt guilty, because I finally understood what had really happened when he said, let's just be friends. He hadn't been letting me go. He had been putting me on hold. And the moment he realized I wasn't waiting anymore, everything began falling apart. After Ethan's phone call, things became ugly faster than I expected. At first, it was subtle. A mutual friend texted me, Hey, is everything okay between you and Ethan? Another friend asked whether Sophie and I had been talking before the breakup, then another, and another. By the end of the week, I realized what was happening. Ethan was telling a different version of the story. Not outright lies. Nothing that could be easily disproven. Just carefully arranged half-truths, the most dangerous kind. According to him, Sophie and I had been getting close while he and I were still together. According to him, he had been blindsided. According to him, his cousin had betrayed him. And according to him, I was the woman who had waited patiently for an opportunity to hurt him. The reality was almost the exact opposite. But reality rarely travels as quickly as emotion. Rumors do. One evening, Sophie arrived at my apartment, looking exhausted. She dropped onto my couch and handed me her phone. I looked down. The screen showed a message from Ethan. You're really going to do this to me. You know what she's like. My jaw tightened. Another message followed beneath it. I trusted you. You're choosing her over family. I looked up. Sophie was staring at the floor. He sent those this morning. What did you say? Nothing. I handed the phone back. You don't owe him an explanation. She gave me a sad smile. That's what hurts. What? The fact that he thinks I do. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Sophie sighed. I barely recognize him. Neither did I. The Ethan I had loved wasn't perfect, but he had never been this manipulative, Or maybe he always had been. And I simply couldn't see it while I was standing inside the relationship. A few days later, things escalated. Ethan posted a black and white photo on social media. The caption was short. "Some people never change. No names, no details, nothing specific." Yet everyone knew exactly who it was about. Comments poured in. "Stay strong. You deserve better. Some people are selfish." I closed the app. Then I deleted it for the rest of the day. Because I had finally learned something important. The more you defend yourself against someone determined to misunderstand you, the more power you give them. But Ethan wasn't finished. Soon he started appearing in places that couldn't possibly be coincidences. The coffee shop near my office, the gym parking lot, the bookstore Sophie loved. Every time he saw me, he offered the same explanation. "Oh wow. Small world." It wasn't a small world, and we both knew it. One Saturday afternoon, Sophie and I were leaving a cafe when Ethan suddenly appeared across the street. My stomach dropped. Daniel's hand tightened around mine. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Ethan walked toward us. His eyes landed on our joined hands. Something flickered across his face. Pain, jealousy, regret. Maybe all three. "Hey," he said. I nodded politely. "Hey." His attention shifted to Sophie. "You've been avoiding me." Sophie looked uncomfortable. "I've been busy." Buzu. The bitterness in his voice surprised even him. Then his gaze returned to me. The silence stretched. Finally, he shook his head. "I just don't understand how this happened." I took a slow breath. "Ethan." "No. Seriously." His voice rose. "You moved on so fast." There it was. The accusation that had been hiding beneath everything. Not that I had betrayed him. Not that Sophie had betrayed him. That I had dared to continue living. "You ended our relationship," I said quietly. His jaw tightened. "You make it sound simple." "Isn't it?" "No." The word came out immediately, almost instinctively, and for a second, he looked shocked that he had said it aloud. Sophie's expression changed. She noticed it too. For months, Ethan had been insisting he wanted freedom. Now, suddenly, freedom wasn't simple anymore. Because freedom had consequences. People moved forward. People healed. People found happiness elsewhere. And apparently, he hadn't expected that part. That night, after Sophie went home, I sat alone in my apartment, thinking about everything that had happened. The memories came back in pieces. Every conversation, every late-night text, every complaint about independence and space. And suddenly I saw a pattern I had missed before. Whenever Ethan wanted distance, he took it. Whenever he needed support, he expected it. Whenever he wanted freedom, he claimed it. But whenever I exercised the same freedom, he became angry. The realization was unsettling. Not because it hurt, because it explained everything. A week later, Sophie called me crying. The moment I heard her voice, I knew something was wrong. "Claire, what happened?" "It's Ethan." My stomach dropped. "What did he do?" She took a shaky breath. "He talked to my mother." I sat upright. "And he told her I was the reason you two broke up." I closed my eyes. Of course he did. Sophie's mother had already called her. So had an aunt. And 2 cousins. Everybody suddenly had opinions. Everybody suddenly believed they knew the truth. The chaos spread through the family like wildfire. By the time the weekend arrived, Sophie looked emotionally exhausted. That was the moment I made a decision. Enough. I wasn't going to argue online. I wasn't going to defend myself to distant relatives. And I wasn't going to spend months cleaning up stories Ethan kept creating. I was going to confront him directly. One final conversation. One final boundary. One final chance to end this. 2 evenings later, I drove to his apartment. The same apartment where I had spent countless weekends. The same apartment where we had planned vacations. The same apartment where he had once told me he couldn't imagine a future without me. Funny how quickly people rewrite forever. When Ethan opened the door, genuine surprise flashed across his face. "Claire, we need to talk." His shoulders stiffened. For a second, I thought he might refuse. Instead, he stepped aside. I walked into the living room. The familiar furniture suddenly felt foreign. The couch, the coffee table, the framed photographs, everything looked the same. Nothing felt the same. We sat across from each other. Silence settled between us. Finally, I spoke. "You need to stop." His expression hardened immediately. "Stop what?" "Talking about me." He looked away. "I'm not." "Stop talking about Sophie." Still silence. "Stop trying to rewrite what happened." That got his attention. His eyes snapped back to mine. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he laughed bitterly. "So now I'm the villain." "No." I leaned forward. "But you're trying to control the story because you lost control of me." The words landed harder than I expected. His face went pale. A muscle in his jaw twitched. For the first time all evening, he looked genuinely wounded. And in that moment, I knew I had touched the truth. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. He just stared at me from across the living room. The anger was still there. But something else had surfaced beneath it. Fear, regret, maybe even shame. I almost looked away. Almost. But after everything that had happened, I needed to hear the truth. Not the version he told his family. Not the version he posted online. The real one. Finally, Ethan spoke. "You make it sound like I'm some kind of monster." His voice was quiet now. Tired. "I'm not saying that." "Then what are you saying?" I took a breath. "I'm saying you ended our relationship." "Ethan." His eyes dropped to the floor. "You asked for space." Silence. "You asked for freedom." More silence. "You asked to be friends." He swallowed. Then his voice cracked. "You were supposed to fight for me." The words hung between us. For a second, I genuinely thought I had heard him wrong. "What?" His laugh sounded broken. "You were supposed to fight." I stared at him. Months of confusion suddenly rearranged themselves into something clear. Something painfully clear. The breakup, the late-night texts, the jealousy, the rumors, the anger, the obsession, all of it. Ethan had never expected me to accept his decision. In his mind, the breakup wasn't the end. It was a test. A test I didn't know I was taking. He had expected me to chase him, to convince him to stay, to prove my love, to keep choosing him no matter what he did. And when I respected his words instead, he interpreted it as rejection. The realization was almost unbelievable. "You wanted me to argue." His eyes filled with tears. "You didn't even try." I stared at him. For a brief moment, I saw the man I used to love. Not the angry version. Not the manipulative version. Just someone deeply confused. Someone who wanted reassurance but asked for distance. Someone who wanted commitment while demanding freedom. Someone who had created a problem he didn't know how to solve. But understanding someone doesn't mean excusing them. You can't punish people for believing you. I said softly. The words seemed to hit him harder than anything else. His shoulders slumped. The fight left his face. And for the first time since our breakup, he looked truly defeated. Not because he had lost me, because he had finally understood why. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Then I stood. The conversation was over. Ethan didn't stop me, didn't argue, didn't ask me to stay. He simply watched as I walked toward the door. Just before I reached it, I heard him speak. "Claire." I paused. "I'm sorry." The words were quiet, almost fragile. I looked back, and for the first time in months, I believed he meant them. Not because he wanted me back, because reality had finally caught up with him. I nodded. Then I left. The next morning, Sophie called. How did it go? I leaned against my kitchen counter and looked out the window. The city was waking up. People rushing to work. Cars moving through intersections. Life continuing. It ended. I said, "What do you mean?" I think he finally understands. There was a pause. Then Sophie exhaled softly. Good. A few days later, Ethan sent one final message. I'm sorry for everything. I should have handled this differently. I hope you're happy. I read it twice. Then I locked my phone. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I was angry, because some chapters deserve a quiet ending. Eventually, I wrote back, I wish you well. But I think it's best if we keep our distance. Then I deleted his number. Not dramatically, not angrily, simply because there was no reason to keep holding on. After that, the silence returned. But this time it was different. This silence wasn't tension. It wasn't uncertainty. It was peace. And peace, I discovered, sounds very different from loneliness. Months passed. Sophie stayed. Not loudly, not desperately, not in the way people sometimes perform love when they're afraid it won't survive on its own. She stayed quietly, consistently. When I had a stressful day, she listened. When she had a difficult week, I listened. No games, no hidden tests, no emotional traps. Just two people choosing each other. One Sunday morning, we were sitting together in a small diner near the river. The kind of place with chipped coffee mugs and pancakes bigger than the plates. Sophie reached across the table and touched my hand. You look different. I smiled. Different how? Lighter. I laughed softly. Maybe I finally am. She squeezed my hand. No dramatic speech followed. No grand declaration. Just warmth. Just certainty. And somehow that felt more meaningful than all the emotional chaos I had mistaken for love in the past. A few weeks later, as we walked back to my apartment after dinner, Sophie stopped beneath a streetlight. The city glowed around us. Cars passed. People laughed somewhere down the block. For a moment, everything felt still. I need to tell you something. I smiled. Okay. She looked nervous, which was unusual. I know how messy everything was. I nodded. And I know people judged us. Another nod. But if I could go back and change how we met? She paused. I wouldn't. Something warm spread through my chest. Neither would I. I stepped closer, then kissed him. Slowly. Gently. Not because we were proving anything to anyone. Not because we were trying to win some imaginary competition. But because we were happy, and happiness doesn't need witnesses. As the months became a year, I found myself thinking less and less about Ethan. Not out of bitterness, out of growth. The truth was simple. Ethan wanted freedom. He could still control. He wanted distance without consequences. He wanted me waiting while he figured out what he wanted. But life doesn't work that way. People move forward. People heal. People choose new paths. And sometimes, the person who truly values you arrives only after you've stopped chasing someone who doesn't. Looking back now, I don't hate Ethan. I don't even resent him. In a strange way, he taught me one of the most important lessons of my life. When someone tells you who they are, believe them. When someone asks for freedom, give it to them. And when someone chooses to leave, let them. Because the people who genuinely want to stay never need to test your love to find out whether it's real. Today, Daniel and I still choose each other. Not because we're afraid of losing one another. Not because we're trapped. Not because either of us owes the other anything. We stay because we want to, every single day. And that difference changes everything.